Week 0 showed us what we basically already knew.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, which is officially back. I'm so excited. Unbelievably stoked. This episode brought to you by Ultimate College Football HC, a brand new mobile game that is completely free, has no ads, 100% playable offline. Use promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. We're going to hit 3 different conferences today. We're going to hit the ACC to start. We're going to hit Washington in the Big Ten a little bit later and their record prediction. Roman Tomashoff and I do not see eye to eye on that matter. And we'll hit the Big 12 with Texas Tech. But we start with Florida State and SMU. And more fallout from the weekend, which was eventful, shall we say. It was eventful. Heck of a day for underdogs. Underdogs, a perfect 4-0 against the spread. New Mexico, poor New Mexico, they blew a 17-point lead to an FCS team at home. That's not what Bronco Mendenhall was looking for. They covered the spread, and Delaware State covered, and Nevada covered, and Georgia Tech covered. Underdogs, 4-0, not going to last forever. But Florida State, I said coming into the year with DJU at quarterback, not a national championship contender. And what do you know? They lost even earlier than I expected them to. My preseason record prediction for the Seminoles was 10-2 or 11-1. Because I feel like their roster is just going to be better than a lot of the teams they play. Guess what? That's true on paper. That's all true on paper. And we saw it on the field on Saturday. Is that the best Florida State's going to play all year? Gosh, I hope not, if you're Mike Norvell. And you know what? I suspect that it's not the best they're going to play. Hot take. Hot take. They will have better games. Someone the other day, I thoroughly enjoy perusing YouTube comments. They can go in so many different directions, and they are just wildly entertaining. You all are just very, very much fun. One of you left perhaps the most intelligent comment ever. It said, quote, "No one is as good or as bad as they look in their first game," end quote. That's good. That's good. That's really sharp. If you're the person that left that comment, shout out to you. Props to you. That's pretty good. However, DJU is not playing his first game of college football. You can look at Florida State's defensive line and their offensive line for that matter and say, you know what? They're going to play better. They didn't look like they had been, I don't know, maybe they hadn't been hitting in fall camp or they didn't have the edge they needed. Now they're going to have a drive because it's the Tim Tebow factor. When they lost to, I believe it was Ole Miss way back in the day, stuffed on 4th and 1. He comes out, gives the speech. You'll never have seen any player in the entire country play as hard as I will play the rest of the season. Maybe Florida State needed a swift kick in the rear end. And that defensive line, I bet they will play better. Because they got manhandled. Georgia Tech's offensive line moved them around. 190 rushing yards. That shouldn't have happened from any team. There should not have been a single team on Florida State's schedule except for maybe Miami that could run for 190 yards on that defensive line. They got embarrassed. They got worked. And guess what? They get a chance to quiet the people who are out there just crapping on them all over the place. Oh my gosh, they're overrated. Oh my gosh, they're just this, that, and the other thing. If Florida State wins out, their playoff odds have dropped from 36% before the season to now 12%. If they win the ACC, they of course get the automatic bid. But I'm more optimistic about Florida State's defensive line than I am DJ Uiagalelei. Because that was the first time that D-line unit had ever taken the field together. That was the very first time, and that wasn't good. That was a bad starting point. This, however, was not the first time I've seen DJ Uiagalelei underwhelm in a big game. In Oregon State's 4 losses last year, he did not throw for over 220 yards. He hit 220 once. He did not throw for over 220 yards in any of them. He was under 50% completion, at or below 50% in 2 of the 4 losses. against good teams. That's what he is. We've seen him for several years. There was an amazing reality that was flying around the other day, which is that DJU was brought out in the same class as CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. He's not going to be those sorts of guys. If he was, he wouldn't still be in college. Doesn't mean he can't win you some football games, but he's not going to be the reason you win a football game. And if Florida State cannot run the football, I talked about the defensive line. The same goes for the offensive line. Brian Smith and I, going into the game last week, talked about how they needed to be able to run the football, or that's what they were going to try to do, and it is what they wanted to do. And it looked like they didn't trust DJ. The only times they were able to complete passes that were even past the first down markers were on 4th and 7, 4th and 8 when they had to throw the ball. But there were deep shots available in that game. DJ didn't hit them. And he's going to have games this year where he does. And the DJ defenders will come back and, oh my gosh. And by the way, I don't think most Florida State fans are DJ defenders. Some of you are. But most of you see what everybody else sees, which is, yeah, this guy is really just not very good. He's not good enough to win a national championship with. And he's not. He's not. Even if you have a dominant team around him, I don't know if, unless you put him on like 2021 Georgia, which had Stetson Bennett, by the way, who turns out was quite good at the quarterbacking thing in college football. Even if you put him on a team like that, they're not competing for a national championship. So that's one thing that we learned is Florida State has to get a swift kick in the rear end on both sides of the ball in the trenches if they're going to have any semblance of a successful season and get into the playoff. But they are not capable of winning out. They still have to play Clemson. They still have to play Miami. They still have to play Notre Dame. And my goodness, they still have to play Florida. And if Georgia Tech can beat Florida State, don't tell me that Florida can't. Just because Florida's record's going to be terrible this year doesn't mean they couldn't win that football game. Even if they go 3-1 in those games, that's not getting you in. It is not getting you in, not as an at-large team. So you have to either find a way to win the ACC, and you've already got a conference loss on the resume, or you have to somehow undergo a massive turn of events. You have to turn the tides, as it were, and you have to win the rest of your games. Good luck with that. Good luck with that. Quick note on SMU as well. Question about SMU going into this year. Are they truly ready? Are they ready to be a Power 4 team? Their week 0 game said that they are not. But what is their next game going to look like? What about the game after that? What about their first ACC game? What about when they play Florida State in a few weeks? See, these are massive data points. You can't look at 1/12 of the season. Think about it in the context of baseball. I'm going to try and do some quick math off the top of my head. 12, 13, about 13 games, roughly. If you saw 13 games from a Major League Baseball team, how much of that equation do you have? Not even close to all of it. But you kind of know. You have an idea. You don't have the whole idea, but you have an idea. The season starts in early April. By the middle of April, you know, okay, there's some potential here. I see this. Hey, this trend needs to change. Hey, that trend needs to change. Good news is there's still a lot of time to change those trends, but it doesn't mean that changes don't have to be made. Something has to move. SMU's got to be better at the line of scrimmage. SMU needs to commit to Preston Stone as a quarterback and figure out how to get him in rhythm to throw the ball down the field. If Florida State wants to have the sort of season that they set up for themselves with the way they recruited in the transfer portal this offseason, they have to adjust in the trenches majorly. But based on those performances, Florida State, I still don't believe Florida State is a national title contender. I think it is more likely SMU turns themselves into an ACC title contender than Florida State reaches national championship level. And right now, neither one appear very likely. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Washington is new in the Big Ten. Their schedule is pretty tough on the back end. Are they going to make a bowl game, or will they be TCU from 2 years ago? That's coming up next. Hey, Locked On College Football fans, want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love. Ultimate College Football HC. In this amazing game and simulation, you get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of your favorite team, whoever it is? Washington's coming up, Texas Tech later today. Whoever they're in there, from recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps, it's all in your hands. All you got to do is prove that you can handle the pressure. And here's what you'll really love about the game. You're responsible for calling plays. That's right. Your strategy will not only determine the success of your football season, but will shape the future and legacy of your program. Ultimate College Football HC, completely free, no ads, 100% playable offline. You can take it with you on the go. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On College Football fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Make sure to take advantage of this perk as it will get your team off to a strong start. To download the game, visit ultimate-cfb.com or look it up on the app stores. Ultimate College Football HC. Begin your coaching legacy today. What do you make of Washington? Their win total, according to FanDuel, is 6.5. I think they're a bowl team. I don't know if they're a lot much more than that. That's Roman Tomashoff, Locked On Huskies, joining me here to discuss. So 6.5 win total, Roman. I'm leaning towards the under. I see the over, but I think they're making a bowl game. Like, I don't see a full TCU regression here from national championship runner-up to now you just don't make a bowl game. I don't see that. I also don't see what I expect from Michigan this year, which is you're not a national championship level, but you are going to be a top 15, 20 team. I think there's a middle ground there, and Washington can thread that needle.
Yeah, and you know, Spencer, that's exactly where I've had them. I'm right in the middle there at 8-4, where you look at the schedule. I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit. One of my biggest things that I've had all offseason is I legitimately believe this team can beat Iowa. And I'm looking at the matchup that
wow.
Yeah, it's I know.
The fans in Iowa City are not going to like that.
That's fine. I understand it, but when their offense can score over 20 points a game, then we can have a discussion. That's kind of where I am right now, where I think that defense is elite. I think that's going to be one of the best defenses in college football. But I can say the same thing about Steve Belichick's defense up at Washington. I've been really impressed with the scheme up there. My question is, which one of those two offenses is going to score a little bit more? And right now, with what we've seen from what Jed Fish can do and what he's able to scheme up, I have to give the edge to him right now, where it's going to be a low-scoring game. It's going to be a true Big Ten defensive battle. But as of right now, I want to give the edge to Washington because of the experience of Will Rogers, because of some of the really exciting playmakers that they have on that side of the ball, plus Iowa's offense-ish, if you're going to call it that.
It's not great.
Nope.
It's not great.
Nope.
It could be better. They made a change, finally.
Yeah.
You know, it's like USC on defense. Like, okay, we knew that this change needed to be made before last season. You made it going into this year. I mean, better late than never on that front. Two reasons I don't think Washington goes into Iowa and wins. Number one, I see what you're saying about the scheme Washington's going to bring. I question whether they have the personnel to play at the sort of level that scheme might be producing in 2 to 3 years' time, especially with the way that Jed Fish and company are recruiting up in Seattle. Number two, Iowa at home, that's a tough place to win. That's a tough place to win. And you know, I have dogged on Iowa's offense, rightfully so. It's bad. It has been bad. I still don't expect it to be good, but this is one of the highest floor programs in all of college football. I think Iowa's floor is higher than Washington's this year, and they have a lot more continuity than Washington. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But that's why I don't see them beating Iowa. Is that's not a program where when you're trying to figure stuff out, you just go into their home stadium and win a football game. I think you have to be decidedly the better football team, and I don't think Washington is.
So I certainly hear your point, and I respect that. I don't disagree with anything that you're saying. Just the more that I look at it, the more I look at Washington's defense, I feel that it's going to create a ton of turnovers. This defense is so sound. They brought in a whole lot of veterans to run it in year one. They brought in guys like Cameron Broussard from Sacramento State, who's somebody who Michigan and Ohio State were really hot on the recruiting trail after. They brought in Justin Harrington, a seventh-year senior. Spencer, I was still in college when Justin Harrington was getting recruited out of high school. They brought in a guy like Deshaun Lynch, another Sacramento State guy who's real flexible all over the defensive line. I love what he can do. Sebastian Valdez up front. They brought in a lot of guys who are going to execute the scheme at a high level. Ephesians Pricehock at corner being another one. And that's without mentioning Carson Bruner, the middle linebacker, who, in my opinion, is going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. And the more from what I've watched from this defense at practice, and from the more that I've seen out of it, the more that I think, yes, this defense is going to create turnovers and wreak some havoc. My question is, and that's the biggest question with Washington, right? Is there are a lot of things going on, there's a lot of movement, but as long as the offensive line can be average, I think that Washington can exceed 6-6.
Okay, well, let's get into it here. They start with Weber State and Eastern Michigan. No issues there. Those will be wins. Then the Apple Cup neutral site against Washington State. I've got that as a win, and the Northwestern game. I think this is a 4-0 start. I wouldn't sleep on that Apple Cup, though. I think between Washington State and Oregon State, the Pac-12 remainders, I think Washington State's the better of the two. And, I'm interested to see how they progress to the quarterback position post Cam Ward. I think that's a game that Washington should win. I think it's one that they absolutely can lose if they don't show up ready to play.
So I agree with you there. The neutral site, we can use air quotes there since it's at
That'll be a home game for Washington.
Yeah, pretty much. I feel that's going to factor in a little bit more there. But I do agree with you that the Wazoo team is more talented than people think. I do have Washington winning there, and I have them starting 4-0. I actually have them starting 5-0, where that Rutgers team is really solid. Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
I really do like that team. Alvin guy, that dude can play. I really love watching him. The Muhammad Toure injury is rough. I think that Greg Schiano has done a really nice job there. He schemed up a really, really solid and But the more that I look at it, and I look at what Jed Fish's first season at Washington can be. This is a Washington team who, it happened a bunch of years ago, but we've seen Washington have to go across the country on a Friday night. In the not so distant past, it feels like it was a lifetime ago at this point. So it's something that this program has been able to do before. None of the guys on this team were there, but this program has shown that they can go win in Piscataway on a Friday night against a much different team. But I have faith that they're going to be able to do that.
Okay, so this is where we disagree because I have been on this for a while. I think Rutgers is winning that football game. Okay. And it's not because I don't think Washington is capable of winning. It is a long trip. It is a Friday night. So you have a long trip across the country and a short week of prep. And Rutgers is not bad. If I asked you right now, what was Rutgers' record last year? Most people probably wouldn't be able to tell you. They went 7-6 and beat Mario Cristobal's Miami Hurricanes in the Pinstripe Bowl. You probably wouldn't know that. And guess what? They did that with a quarterback completing less than 50% of his passes. I'm not wild about the transfer they brought in, but it's got to be at least a little bit better. Like, I think Rutgers, they've got kind of a favorable schedule. Could be sneaky nice. So I think Washington loses there. I think they lose at Iowa as well. I think they lose to Michigan, sandwiched in between. I think they beat Indiana because Washington's ability to reset, I think, is much stronger than what Kurt Cignetti will be able to do there in Bloomington. And then I think they lose 3 of their last 4 because the schedule just beefs up. USC at home, at Penn State, UCLA at home, I think that's a win because I'm incredibly down on UCLA this year. And at Oregon, I think that's a loss. I think where Washington can get themselves to the 7-8 win range is if they can find a way to win either the USC game or at Rutgers. I think those games, if you win either one, I think USC is a better team, but I think Rutgers is the tougher matchup because it's such a long trip and you're on the road and you're going up against a solid team. Those are kind of the linchpin games here that'll determine whether Washington, in my view, goes over or under this win total.
I'm 100% with you there. It's something we, talked about over on Locked On Huskies a little bit last week, where when we were going through the schedule here, looking at what the season is going to turn into, those are the 2 biggest games. It's what happens at USC and what happens at Rutgers.
Hosting USC.
Yes, sorry, at home against USC.
Correct.
Where I really like what they're doing on defense, Spencer.
I do too. I do too. I've been on this for months. I've been on this for months. I had Yogi Roth on the show at Big Ten Media Days. He sees the same sort of thing. The College Game Day guys were talking about USC. Everyone has wanted Lincoln Riley to make radical changes on the defensive side of the ball. He's got a new defensive coordinator and 2 other new coaches, one of whom was a head coach at North Dakota State, one of whom was a defensive line coach in the NFL. Like, they brought in guys on that side of the ball, and I think personnel-wise, if you looked at Washington's defense and USC'd probably have the edge.
Yeah, USC has got a super strong defense there. I really do love.
Well, I don't know about super strong. I think dramatically better.
Yeah, in terms of where we've seen Lincoln Riley defenses in the past, it's going to be super strong. I feel that that's fair to say. When I look at Washington's defense, though, one thing that I'll say, I'm going to mark it down as we record here. I think that we're going to look back at this Washington defense at the end of October, early November, and you're going to say, oh, there are a lot of dudes on that defense that we didn't necessarily realize. Where there are a lot of guys they took that were under the radar players, whether it be, Ephesians Prysock, who, it's hard to call a Pac-12 honorable mention under the radar.
Yeah, he's not flying under my radar. I mean, I know that's a good player. That's a big get.
Yeah, absolutely. But when you look at who's playing next to him, Takario Davis, some people might not know that name. And then you look at a guy like Cam Broussard as a guy who I've been so impressed with. They move him all over the defense, Spencer. They got him playing safe. They got him playing linebacker. He's lining up as, on the edge. He's all over the formation. There are so many guys in this defense that fit the scheme so perfectly that I think it's really going to maximize a lot of talent on just up here in Mont Lake.
Roman Tomashoff, Locked On Huskies. He's got him 8-4. I've got him 6-6. They're either destined to go 7-5 or one of us is just going to be wildly off the mark. Roman, appreciate it as always.
Spencer, thanks for having me.
Texas Tech, that dark horse team in the Big 12, or a dark horse team. Do they get to 8-9 wins this year? That is coming up next. Tired after lunch? Guess what? You're not alone. In fact, research shows that more than 70% of us hit the wall after lunch. Let a 5-hour energy shot help you leap over that wall instead of crashing into it. Keep your productivity going. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5-Hour Energy website has flavors galore like watermelon, tropical burst, grape, berry, and more. There's a flavor for everyone. So go try them all. On the site, you even have the option of build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. You choose the flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5-Hour Energy product today. That's exactly what you should be doing. So go and do it. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. LOCKEDONCFB. That's the code. Go to 5hourenergy.com today. I really want to like Texas Tech a lot. I really do. I have two questions that can be answered in the first couple of weeks. So, Texas Tech's schedule, not brutal, not a cakewalk either. Their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is set at 7.5. I do like the over. I think they're an 8 or a 9 win team, and I'll have a pretty good idea after watching 2 or 3 games. Two questions are offensive line and quarterback, because I like their head coach. I think their roster's solid. I love the weapons they brought in this offseason. Jalen Conyers from Arizona State, Josh Kelly, the wide receiver coming from Washington State, MPH, the defensive back coming from Houston. Look, these are playmakers. These are playmakers, guys that are going to make an impact for the Red Raiders this year. For a team that was solid last year, they weren't great. They weren't terrible. The quarterback situation was back and forth. Got to find consistency at that position. You have to be able to rely on Baron Morton, not to be some Heisman caliber first team all conference guy, but to be an above average quarterback. You need him to take a step forward. You need him to realize his full potential if Texas Tech is going to reach that threshold. And boy, you have to figure out the offensive line. I read a report recently that Texas Tech had one guy in a day or a week at practice play up to 3 different positions. Like they're still shuffling and figuring out how to go. The good news is they'll ease into the schedule for 1 week. They play Abilene Christian at home first. That will be a victory. That's an FCS opponent. It's an in-state Texas team. Abilene Christian, good FCS program. Not going to beat Texas Tech. I'm not worried about it. Week 2. This is where things start to get a little bit dicey. I do think they go into Pullman and they beat Washington State. You better watch it, though. Washington State has beaten Wisconsin each of the last 2 years. And last year, on paper, Wisconsin should have won the game. Yeah, they didn't. Pullman, tough place to play. Washington State will be 1-0, meaning they won't have a feeling of demoralization. They won't be feeling down on their luck. No, they're going to be looking to make a statement, and this is a statement game. Washington State, you're going to get a great punch from Washington State in this game. I think Texas Tech is capable of responding. So I think they go in there and win, but you better watch for it. Then they come back home. They play North Texas, Arizona State, Cincinnati. Win, win, win. Could I see a stumble in there? Not really. I don't think Arizona State is ready to be at the same level as Texas Tech yet, though I think they take a step forward. Cincinnati, I'm just not that inspired by really anywhere. I think they'll probably have a coaching change by the end of this season. I think that for Texas Tech, if they can start 5-0, it's a great place to be, obviously, but it's just so feasible. And I don't think it's asking the world of them, but they're not going to breeze to it. You got to earn it. If Texas Tech is 5-0, they should get consideration for being a top 25 team in the AP poll. First loss of the year, the following week at Arizona. I am not as high on Arizona as everybody else, in that a lot of other people, like Max Chadwick of Pro Football Focus, thinks they're winning the Big 12 this year. Don't put me in that camp. I am not picking Arizona to make the Big 12 championship game. Quite the opposite. But I do think, well, I guess there's only one opposite, which is they're not making it, as if there's some wide spectrum there. You either make it or you don't. I don't think Arizona is going to. Arizona is still a solid team. They're still a 7-8 win team. This is a game. If Texas Tech wins that game and they are 6-0, boy, Lubbock is going to be cooking. Lubbock is going to be cooking. Either way, I think they come back home. They play Baylor. I think they're the better team. I like the quarterback more. I think they beat the Bears there. Then, couple of road games here. At TCU and at Iowa State. I think Iowa State is a for sure loss. That is how I feel about that matchup going into the year. I like Iowa State quite a bit. I'm not, Josh Pate level of bullish on them, but I do like their returning production. I think their head coach is solid, and you've got a good quarterback who could be poised for a big, big year in Rocco Becht. The question is, what else is there? Or what's the real ceiling? Have we seen the ceiling for Matt Campbell as a head coach? That's another game that can go either way. I lean towards the home team in those instances because, well, statistically, that's how it goes. I think that is a loss for Texas Tech. I'm going to come back to the TCU game. Colorado at home. I think Texas Tech is the better team. Not by a lot. That's another game that can go either way. Of every team in the Big 12 that I can see in some form or fashion making a run at the Big 12 championship game, which I think is going to be Utah and Kansas, Texas Tech might have the biggest range of outcomes of any team. Of any team. Again, I have them 9-3 or 8-4 because I think they lose at Oklahoma State. Tough place to win, even though, again, I'm not as high on the Cowboys as everyone else. Just like Arizona, they're still good. That's still a good team. You have to go on the road, and it's a tough place to win. Then they come back home, they play West Virginia. I think they win that game. So I have them 9-3 or 8-4 because I've got TCU listed as a toss-up. TCU, 24/7 Sports likes their roster probably more than you should read into. But TCU, again, has got a good coach. We know that. I think they're capable at quarterback, and I really like their defensive coordinator hire, and the defense was a problem last year. It was a major problem. So they bring in Andy Avalos, who was fired as the head coach from Boise State. Last time he was a defensive coordinator at Oregon, he was really good. He was really, really good. So I like that move a lot for TCU, and I can see that game going either way. Because TCU and Texas Tech, I put in the same category. I think they're anywhere from, I think they're an 8 or 9 win team. And you could sell me on they win 5 games. You could sell me on they win 10 games. And I could sit there, listen to that pitch and say, yeah, all right, I believe you. Yeah, I can see it. Because Arizona, I have that as a loss. They could win that game. Baylor, they could stumble at home. Probably not. I'm not supremely high on Baylor. Don't love their quarterback room. I do like what they did at offense coordinator. TCU, got it as a toss-up. Iowa State, I think that's a loss. I might feel differently the week of the game. Like Arizona, TCU, Iowa State, Colorado, Oklahoma State, West Virginia. All of these games, I have the predictions as I've laid them out. But the week of the game, I may feel very differently. There are not that many games on here that can't go either way. Some could go in Texas Tech's direction, and some could go against them. I think they're an utterly fascinating team. I think Texas Tech and UCF are my two kind of dark horse picks. They have the same win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, of 7.5. I think that they are both dark horse capable teams of getting to the Big 12 championship game. But how many times have we said that about Texas Tech? This is year 3 for Joey McGuire. This is Baron Morton's first full year as a starter. Can he stay healthy? What's the offensive line going to look like? And how do they play on a week-to-week basis? Because we've seen some high highs and we've seen some lows with Texas Tech as well. So I think they're an utterly fascinating team in the Big 12 in what is easily the most entertaining conference title race in the country, because this is an 8-4, 9-3 team to me that could easily win the conference title. I think that's 100% possible with this schedule. They could get to the conference championship game and anything could happen. Am I predicting them to get there? Nope. Is it within the realm of possibility? Yeah. I think the win range for Texas Tech, I think they have 2 losses minimum. So 10-2 is probably their best outcome. If it all goes wrong and you lose a bunch of one possession games, if you become Nebraska of the Big 12, you go 5-7. That's the biggest range for any team. That's why Texas Tech is going to be so much fun. That is far from the last Big 12 team that I will do this week, because there's still more record predictions to do, and the season kicks off this very week. So that is how we wrap today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I'll see you next time, and until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.